When it comes to muscle cars, people immediately think of America. However, it's true that these cars were born in the States, but a lot of other countries also caught this bug. That's because muscle cars were iconic and revolutionary, and no one wanted to miss out. During America's golden era of muscle cars, Australia jumped on the wagon and introduced its own muscle cars. The big three in the muscle car industry were Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. And they had franchises all over the world, and that's where Australia's love affair with the muscle cars started. So, if by now you've only ever heard of the muscle cars that are famous in America, you're going to be shocked to see what Australia has to offer. The 1970s Ford Falcon Coupe came in various models and trims, but both the American and Australian versions had different specs. In the US, the 1970 Ford Falcon was a relatively compact, affordable car that had engines like a 2.8 or 3.3 liter and small V8 options like a 4.9 liter paired with a 3-speed manual or automatic transmissions. It was designed as a really budget-friendly vehicle with sleek styling and feature vehicles. And this muscle car was perfect for the American economy back in the 70s. On the other hand, the Australian Ford Falcon Coupe offered the XB and XC series in the 70s. The Australian version of this muscle car was much bigger and more aggressive than the small and modest American. That's because the Ford manufacturers in Australia were more focused on the performance of the car. The Ford Falcon Coupe had engines like the 4.1-liter inline-six, 5.8-liter Cleveland V8, and even a 6-cylinder turbo option. The Aussie versions of this car were more similar to sports car designs. The Australian Falcon was more suitable for long-distance driving, rough driving, and high performance. And this represented Australia's muscle car culture, with models like the Falcon GT becoming legendary. You've all heard of the iconic Pontiac GTO, and the Holden Monaro GTS was a high-performance version of this American muscle car. This Aussie version was first introduced in the late 1960s. The Holden Monaro GTS came with various engine options, such as 5.0 and 5.7-liter V8 engines. These engines came either with a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic transmission. The GTS also had a more sporty design with bold stripes, an aggressive front grille, and muscular body lines. This muscle also had better suspension and handling dynamics, so it could perform easily on the road. The Australian Monaro GTS was known for its raw, aggressive performance and was built to fly down both the city streets and open roads of Australia. This muscle car was very Australian in character, with a blend of performance and durability that was meant both for long distances and rough conditions. The American counterpart of this car existed under the name of Pontiac GTO and had very similar specs to the Monaro. The Chrysler Valiant Charger was produced in Australia between 1971 and 1978, and it was known for its powerful engine and muscular look. The Australian Charger came with various engine options, such as the famous 4.3-liter Hemi 6-cylinder engine, which was quite unique to Australia. This engine came in different performance levels, including the high-output E49 variant, producing 302 horsepower and paired with a 4-speed manual transmission. The other engine options were 3.5 and 4.0-liter Hemi 6s, and also the larger 5.2 and 5.9-liter V8s. This car was all about high performance and was specially built for racing. On the other hand, the American version was the famous Dodge Charger, but it was a much bigger car and had different specs. The American Charger was introduced in the late 1960s and early 1970s and had big block V8s like the 7.2-liter and the legendary 7.0-liter Hemi V8, making it a one-of-a-kind muscle car. The Australian Valiant Charger was much more compact, and it was designed as a combo of speed and performance. This was more convenient for Australian roads and conditions. The American version was more focused on raw horsepower. The 1974 Holden Sandman was a rare Australian muscle car, and it had all the utilities of a van but with sporty styling so it could appeal to the youngsters. The Sandman had two engine options like the 3.3-liter inline-six and the more powerful 5.0-liter V8. It came with a 4-speed manual or 3-speed automatic transmission and had bucket seats, sports instrumentation, and very rare exterior details. The Sandman was originally meant to be a utility vehicle, but also stylish so it could attract the younger generation who wanted both convenience and fun. A distinct version of this muscle car was that you could customize it with vibrant paints, custom interiors, and even surfing-related accessories, as it was meant to show the Australian beach culture. If you want to compare it to the American market, they didn't exactly have a muscle car similar to the Holden Sandman. The closest version would be the American Chevrolet El Camino or the Ford Ranchero, which were also both muscle cars that had the looks and functions of both a car and a truck. But since these cars were more about convenience, they didn't fit in with the sporty lifestyle of Americans. All the American utility cars were built for towing and hauling, but the Australian Sandman was more about style and surf culture, so it was a unique muscle car in the Australian industry. The Holden Torana GTR was from the early 1970s, and it was a compact and lightweight Australian muscle car that had a reputation for strong performance. The GTR was powered by a 2.6-liter six-cylinder engine that had around 130 horsepower. The more aggressive version of this car was the Torana GTR XU1, and it had a 3.0-liter inline-six with 3 carburetors and offered 160 horsepower, paired with a 4-speed manual transmission. The high-performance version was meant for rallying and circuit racing because of its lightweight body and sporty styling. The XU1 became iconic and was even competing with powerful rivals like the Ford Falcon GT. The closest U.S. comparison of this car would be cars like the Chevrolet Nova or the Ford Maverick, although these were bigger and had V8 engines. American cars usually preferred V8 engines and raw power, while the Aussies wanted convenience and high performance. The Ford Falcon GT is one of Australia's most iconic muscle cars. The Australian version was powered by a 5.8-liter Cleveland V8 engine that produced around 300 horsepower. It featured a 4-speed manual transmission, a robust suspension that made it perfect both for racing and the Aussie roads. The XY Falcon GT's most famous version, the GT HO Phase 3, was built specifically for racing, with improvements like a high-output Holley carburetor, better camshaft, and a heavy-duty top-loader gearbox. The GT HO Phase 3 was the fastest four-door production car in the world during the 70s, and it had a top speed of 225 kilometers an hour. It also had bold styling with shaker hoods and aggressive spoilers. However, the American Ford Falcon didn't focus that much on performance. The U.S. Falcon was a smaller, more affordable car that didn't have any of the high-performance features of the Australian GT. Although in the 60s the American Falcon did have V8 engines, they were quite small, and by the 1970s, the American Falcon had become a budget vehicle with limited power options. And as you know, the Australian Falcon GT was all about performance and showed how strong the country's muscle car culture was. The Holden Commodore was first introduced in 1978, but it quickly became one of Australia's most successful and reliable cars. Over the years, it had various models and engine options, but some of the high-performance models were the Commodore SS and the Commodore HSF-V. The Commodore typically had V6 and V8 engine options, with later models using engines like the 3.6-liter V6 and 6.0 or 6.2-liter LS series V8 engines, which had up to 430 horsepower in some HSV versions. Transmission options included 6-speed manual and 6-speed automatic gearboxes, along with advanced features like sport-tuned suspension, large brakes, and better interiors for the comfort of the driver. The Commodore was all about power, practicality, and handling, so that made it the ideal muscle car. The American version of the Holden Commodore was sold as the Chevrolet SS and as the Pontiac G8. These American models shared the same basic functions and engines as their Australian counterparts, such as the 6.0 and 6.2-liter V8s. However, the American versions were meant to be high-performance sedans. The Valiant Pacer was produced by Chrysler Australia from 1969 to 1972, and it was a high-performance, budget-friendly version of the Valiant sedan. The Australian Pacer came with a 3.7-liter Hemi straight-six engine that had around 175 to 185 horsepower depending on the model year. It featured a 3-speed manual transmission with floor shifts, sporty suspension tuning, and unique exterior styling with racing stripes, unique badges, and bold colors. The Valiant Pacer was designed for people who wanted performance but were on a budget. The American Valiant of the same era was a more basic, compact car designed for convenience rather than performance. American Valiants typically came with smaller engines like the Slant 6 or low-power V8s. They didn't have any of the sporty look and high performance of the Australian Pacer. While the American Valiant had upgrades like V8 engines, it was never meant to be a performance car. The Ford Falcon Cobra was introduced in Australia between 1978 and 1980, and it was a limited edition version of the Falcon designed for people who wanted high performance. The Cobra was powered by a 5.8-liter Cleveland V8 engine generating around 300 horsepower and 295 pound-foot of torque. It featured a 4-speed manual transmission, performance-focused suspension, and distinct styling with unique graphics, stripes, and a sporty spoiler. The Cobra also had upgraded brakes, 14-inch alloy wheels, and a sportier interior with bucket seats and better instrumentation, making it an amazing choice for Australian muscle car fans. However, the American version of the Ford Falcon had a different focus and didn't have a model similar to the Falcon Cobra. The U.S. Falcon was more compact and affordable and had smaller inline-six engines and smaller V8 options. While American muscle cars were generally focused on high-performance V8s, they didn't have a counterpart to the Falcon Cobra's combo of sporty styling and power, particularly in the same lightweight package. The Australian Falcon Cobra was more suitable for the Australian market due to its performance, better handling, and style. The Leyland Force 7V was produced in Australia from 1973 to 1974, and it was a sporty coupe developed by the Leyland P76. It was powered by a 4.4-liter V8 engine that delivered around 200 horsepower, with another option of a 5.0-liter V8 that increased the output to up to 250 horsepower. The Force 7V featured a 4-speed manual or 3-speed automatic transmission, and its design included a sleek aerodynamic body with features like a fastback roofline and wide wheel arches. The interior had both comfort and sportiness, with bucket seats and a driver-focused layout. The Force 7V became famous for its mixture of performance and style. In America, they didn't have a counterpart to the Leyland Force 7V. The American market had its own muscle cars like the Chevrolet Camaro and Ford Mustang, which were built for performance but had totally different styling and engine options. These cars had bigger and more powerful V8 engines and focused on raw performance and straight-line speed. But the Force 7V was designed to compete in the Australian market with its combo of performance, handling, and comfort. So, what do you think of these Australian muscle cars and their American counterparts? Which ones would win a race? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe to hear about more iconic cars.